about the motivational interviewing again. And just before we start, I want to put it in a little bit of a context that I have done a series over the last 2, 3, maybe 4 semesters of little pieces of motivational interviewing. And this is just kind of pulling it together and reminding us in this group about the basics of motivational interviewing. We're not going to learn anything new unless you haven't been here before, but this is, think of it as a review and some ideas about how you would practice this. So before we start, I always, because I am a social worker, a behavioral health provider, I think it's important to me to be clear about how I'm feeling about a certain population or a person I'm about to go into a session with, and just kind of do a check. And some of these questions I've put up here help us to kind of get clear with how we're feeling about our patients. So the first is, what are your beliefs and discomforts around patients experiencing overweight and obesity? And there are people that have some pretty strong opinions about what it means to be overweight. So if you're one of those people, you probably want to get pretty clear with those feelings so that you don't bring them into the room with you. What is the best way to value their autonomy and decisions around their health issues? We want things for our patients. We want outcomes for our patients. If that's not what's most important to them, how do we value their autonomy to make a decision to work on something first, even though we feel this other issue may be more important? And then how do your values, religion, education impact your work with this population? And these are just questions for you to think about. There are no right or wrong answers, and you don't need to share them here today at clinic. So, okay. So let's talk about MI and what it is. And before I get into the things on this slide, I really thought about in my learning with motivational interviewing, like, what are the guiding principles? What are the things, if I didn't know anything about specific ways of using motivational interviewing, what would I need to know to understand the framework? So there are 4, I think, fairly common guiding principles in MI. And the first is to really resist the arguing and persuasion. It's not our job to persuade people to make a change or to do things differently. The other is to understand your patient's motivations, values, and what's important to them. Next is to listen and listen with empathy. And then 4th is about empowering patients, believe in their autonomy to make a change. So that's going to be our framework. Those are our guiding principles. We'll talk about them a little more, but I wanted to put them out there before we really jumped in. So what is MI? It's a person-centered approach. And by that, it means, yes, we have a clinical protocol. Yes, we have an idea of where we want to get to with this patient, but it's really about them and what their needs are. It is person-centered. It's collaborative, and by that I mean it's an invitation for us to work together to make a change. It's less about me as an expert and you as dietitians have expertise, but it's less about imposing that expertise onto your patients and more about inviting, let's have a discussion about change about your health. It's evocative, and in that I mean we listen more than we talk, and we elicit rather than advise. And by elicit, what is it you would like to work on? What's really important to you and your family right now? This is my favorite piece about motivational interviewing, and it's the responsibility for change. I think as healthcare providers, we're trained to make decisions, and we can often feel frustrated or maybe even burdened by the patient that doesn't change, that we're meeting them regularly, we've been working for 6 months, and there's no movement. And we can get wrapped up in feelings of like, we're not getting anywhere, and I don't want to see this patient, and this is a hopeless case. And if we can think of it as the responsibility for change belongs to the patient, and I'm here to support them when they're ready, it can be a load off a provider's back. And it is respectful to honor their autonomy, their resourcefulness, and their ability to choose the thing they want to work on to make a change. So, what am I not about? Because I think people can make assumptions about motivational interviewing and how they're going to use it and what it's based on. And so I thought we'd just go over some of these real quick. And I pulled these right out of Bill Miller's and Stephen Rollnick's book in 2008 about motivational interviewing. So many healthcare providers are familiar with the trans-theoretical model of change and those stages we have about contemplation and moving forward on the change track, and MI is not based on that. The trans-theoretical model of change helps us find places to recognize a patient's behavior, but that's not what MI is based on. It's not a way of tricking people to get them to do what you want them to do by making deals or thinking you're pushing them, persuading them in the right direction. It's not a specific technique. It's really about communication and listening more than talking, as we showed in that last slide. It's not a technique. It's not a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. We are not trying to plant ideas around behavior or cognitions in our patients' minds as we're talking to them. And it's not just client-centered. You know, Carole Rogers was so big on that client-centered way of talking with patients and really letting them explore, and he would let them wander off into the weeds, so to speak, you know, to where they were just thinking about the things that were troubling them or they wanted to work on. And that's a pretty, you know, useful style for someone that's going to be in long-term therapy. It is not helpful for primary care providers that need to see a patient in 15 minutes and might not see them again for 2 months. So while it's client-centered, it's also directive, and we'll talk about that too. It's not easy to learn. My first training in motivational interviewing happened in 2008, and I'm still working on it. I try to work on it every day, particularly with my teenage sons. So give yourself time to practice, you know, give yourself... even in the grocery store line, chatting at the checkout line, think about the things we've talked about, even if you're just practicing your open-ended questions. And be patient with yourself, because we do trip up. Even people who are identified as experts can trip up in their motivational interviewing. And it's probably not what you were already doing. And I think there are people who have a more motivational interviewing style way of communicating, a more back and forth and empathic and just exploring. But MI does have a framework and a particular path, a way of directing conversations that is different from just that empathic kind of communication. And MI is not the panacea for every clinical challenge. And there was a time when I first learned that I thought I could use MI everywhere, and it doesn't work everywhere. There are times where you really need to just hit the message directly. And here's some examples. I did not put the reference on this slide, my apologies, and I will put that up on our website. There is so much research around these health behavior challenges and the efficacy of motivational interviewing. And these are places where you can see a quick kind of movement in your clients. So the beginning are maintaining healthy habits, you know, things around exercise, family and personal time, good sleep. That's a really great intersection to use motivational interviewing. Giving up or minimizing adverse behaviors, you know, for your smokers, your high-fat, high-calorie diet patients, the speeders. I mean, there are things like that. When you think of adverse health behaviors, there's quite the long laundry list, and MI is really a way to have conversations about that and get some change. And then adhering to medical advice. A piece of motivational interviewing is about goal setting together and making a plan together as provider and patient, and adhering to that medical advice really is an opportunity to use motivational interviewing, but also to see the deal being made between you and your patient, that you think, we're probably going to get somewhere with this, and I'm going to see you back in a month. If you have questions, I tend to talk fairly fast when I'm presenting. So if you have questions, or, you know, please pipe in, ring the bell, however you need me. Folks in the room here at Envision, raise your hand, because I don't want to go too fast, and I want opportunity for people to ask questions. Okay, so you're probably familiar with the concept of ambivalence. That's the place, that's the intersection to work with your patient. When they can express this ambivalence, or you notice, wow, they're on either side of the fence. One time they say this, one time they say that, they can't commit. That's ambivalence. That's the opportunity to kind of push them or direct them in the place you want to go. A lot of people get frustrated with ambivalence in conversation with their patients or their clients, and ambivalence is often perceived as resistance. And I probably should have put that up top. That's the most common. This patient is so resistant. And then as I'm talking maybe to some of my interns or students, I'll say, that sounds more like ambivalence. They're not telling you they don't ever want to change. They're telling you they're really insecure about it right now, and they can't even imagine how it would happen. And the change feels so big, it becomes our job to kind of break it down into some steps. If you argue for one side, an ambivalent person will defend the other. And this happens like clockwork. You can see it, you'll see it happen in your conversation. I use this analogy sometimes when I'm working with the medical students about, we're going to get on a bus with this patient, and the bus is about the change. And if I am fighting for the change and telling them the thing they need to do, I've completely taken up the seat for change. And they're having to sit in I'm not going to do that. I don't want to, because I've locked them in a battle by telling them why they need to change. So if I can just kind of get out of the way and have the conversation, join them a little bit in their resistance, say, I can understand how that would be so hard, that seat becomes open. The change seat is open, and they can sit there and start arguing for reasons they might want to make the change. Is that making sense to my people in the room? Okay. So the other thing to remember about ambivalence, if I have pushed my patient or my client to the place where they really need to defend their behavior, I don't smoke that much. I smoke outside. I don't smoke around my kids. I've been smoking for 20 years and I still have great lung function, or, there's all kinds of reasons they can give you. The likelihood that they're going to change is decreased because they're, in their mind, giving themselves all these good reasons why they should continue that. I have completely taken the space up. There's nowhere for them to imagine the change because they're defending themselves to me. So I don't want to take up the good side of ambivalence. I just want to explore it. I just want to ask questions, really, meaningful questions. Tell me how smoking helped you cope with your anxiety. Tell me how smoking, some particularly young women have an idea in their mind that if they smoke, they won't gain any weight. And in my mind, I'm going, that is so crazy, but I'm going to talk about that with her. She's made a decision about that. So there we go. Next. So how do we work with ambivalence? Well, we want to be sure and recognize it. And then we want to think about a few things where often our patients aren't aware that they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. They really want to change, but I smoke because of this, but I really don't. I want to feel better over here. It's a back and forth kind of conversation. That's a way to recognize it. And it's not our job to hand a patient a solution. The more we say, if you just do this, doctor's orders, everything's going to work out great. You don't want to do that because if they can generate the idea in their mind of how to make the change, they're going to commit to it. They're going to own it more. It's going to feel like it came from them. A way to begin is to mirror what you hear. I'm really nervous about quitting smoking. I'm afraid my caloric intake would go up and I just get so stressed. I would reflect back to them. So what I'm hearing you say is the idea of quitting smoking makes you really anxious and you're concerned that maybe some other not pleasant behaviors would take its place. And then just wait to hear it. Was that right? And see where my patient takes me next and just kind of follow along. It's really difficult and uncomfortable to hold the ambivalence because we feel like they're so close, they can see the change and we really want to make it, and so we want to push. My advice is to just kind of sit there, keep listening for change talk, and we're going to talk about change talk coming up here shortly. what that looks like, how to recognize it when you hear it. The more you can let them talk and listen, the more likelihood you'll get them to come up with their own ideas about making change. And let's see, I would call this a tip, I guess. One tip I have is that if I'm talking more than listening, I'm not doing MI. And I want probably 3 to 7 sentences from a patient or client about the issue they've come to me before I even jump in. So I would make those kind of, what are they, behavioral health noises where you go, You know, it lets them know you're listening, but it also opens the window for them to say a little more. The other thing, this is another little tip about working with ambivalence, is that use your weatherman voice, where it's very calm and it doesn't go up or down so that they can't read if you have some fear or anxiety about what they're telling you they're doing or not doing that's making you uncomfortable. And you're curious about it. You're open, you're non-judgmental. My first clinical work as a social worker was with teenagers and doing, reproductive groups for young girls, talking about substance abuse, in mixed groups. And there were things that those adolescents would say to me that would make my hair stand on end. Just thinking, oh my God, we're going down such a bad road. And how could I keep my provider mask, I guess, to really just stay calm, to sit in that ambivalence about change, to not make judgments about this kid, and let the conversation go in the direction that it needs to go so we could get to a place where they're beginning to use change talk. Any questions? Does that make sense? Okay. So before we jump into change talk, I want to talk about target behaviors, because this is a way that motivational interviewing style is different from the client, just client-centered style. That we come into the meeting with our patient and our clients deciding what the thing is we want to work on. We can make that decision and direct the conversation in a motivation interviewing style to get to these target behaviors. So a target behavior is one that you want to increase or decrease for your patient. I want to increase their exercise time, or I really want to decrease this kiddo's soda intake. That's your target behavior. And so the clinic visit, we're going to infer the target behavior that we want to impact, and we're going to set up the conversation to be able to talk about that behavior and kind of direct them down the road to tell me about your ambivalence, and then tell me what about it you're willing to work on. It really needs for you as the provider to be clearly defined, to really know, what is it I want to work on with this kiddo? What is it I want to work on with this family? It will enhance the visit if you are able to refer back frequently to the target behavior as you're having the conversation. Find ways to slide it in. We want to lower your cholesterol, so blah, 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 blah. And then you talk about something else and about your lowering your cholesterol, because you're just planting that seed that this is something I probably should work on as the patient. Change talk. Change talk is the place that your patient is really starting to think about change. They're making statements and you're listening for words or phrases, and I'll give you a few examples about that they're getting to a place where they want to change. So change talk will direct the discussion in a way, like, I heard you say you thought it might be good to drink less soda. A teenager tells you, I really want to cut down on soda. So you're reminding them of the change talk that they have mentioned. I think I'm jumping a little ahead of myself. So the common dimensions in change talk are desire, ability, reasons, need, and then commitment language. I am going to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to work on that. That would be an example of commitment language. MI uses a lot of acronyms. If you hear people that are MI experts or trainers or frequent users, you would hear them refer to this as darn commitments. I'm really looking for the darn commitments from my patients, and that's what they're talking about. So let's define these. Desire those are statements, questions from your patient about the things they do or don't want. Why would you want to make this change? That's a question you could ask to find out about desire. Ability. Those are questions about or statements about what they believe they can or can't do. I'd be able to cut out sodas, Monday through Friday. I think I want them on the weekend when I go out with my friends, but I think I could do that. That is a statement about ability. That's change talk. That's something you can grab onto and start making a plan. Reasons. Those are why or why not statements. After or because statements. Or a specific reason for change. I don't like that my pants feel so tight, so I would like to really work on losing 10 pounds. They just gave you a reason about why that's important to them. Also, they gave you some change talk, another way to make a plan. The need. That's what patients think they need or don't need to do. I must exercise more. It's important for my kids that I quit smoking. They don't want me to be a smoker anymore. I have got to drink less coffee. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing examples out there, but that's another example of a need statement. Now, commitment, this is the doozy. That's when they tell you they will do something. They intend to do something. They're going to do something. You're like 90% there at getting the deal done and making that negotiation of, okay, you're going to work on that and I'm going to see you back in 30 days. Commitment language, that's probably the most powerful. You can get to commitment. So here, let me give you an example of how I might ask questions to look for that change talk. So for desire, I might ask something like, why would you want to make this change? Trying to explore, why is it important to the patient, to understand what she needs out of this. So ability, how might you go about this in order to succeed? How do you think you'll get this done? For reasons, just ask them, what are the 3 best reasons you have to quit smoking? What's the number 1 reason you have to lower your cholesterol? Those questions go directly to the change talk. Under need is how important. How important is it? And we're going to talk about that in the assessing readiness to change. Any questions so far? Okay. So just briefly, let's talk about resistance. It's different than ambivalence. It comes up, particularly if we're pushing a little hard. So resistance is energy. Embrace it. Use it to help the client move forward. I can see this is really stressful for you. I can see this has become really uncomfortable. What's the next what's the next step? Opposing resistance strengthens it, so don't push. That's the bus analogy again. I'm taking up the whole side of the chair. That chair, I'm owning it. I've filled it up. Let's not do that. Let's leave it open so the patient can sit in that chair. If the resistance increases, change what you're doing. They're either the questions are, I don't want to use the word offensive, that's pretty strong, but the questions are bothering them, making them feel defensive, like they really need to argue for their position. That a clue right there, I'm going down the wrong road. Offer new perceptions, but don't impose or argue them. I've noticed that your family is eating less fast food. Tell me a little more about that. Or you could even say, I've noticed your family is, when we just did everybody's blood pressure, everybody's a little healthier. Tell me about that. And you do not have to answer a patient's or a client's objection or resistance. You can just hear it and sit in it. Just there, I don't want to change. Okay. What I hear you telling me is this not the time for you to change. That's a done deal. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to tell them why they need to change, that they're going to end up, in the grave because their blood pressure's here and their cholesterol's over there, and just let go. And that's hard for health providers. We've been trained to do it differently. Signs of readiness to change. Like, how would we know someone's ready to change? How would we recognize it? There's decreased resistance. They're not arguing for why they want to do that thing anymore, that bad health behavior. There are decreased questions about the problem. They've gotten to a place where they really understand the problem. They understand how it's impacting them and their family. So they have fewer questions about this issue. You're starting to hear some resolve or resolutions. After the new year, I'm really going to work on, or when summer starts and I'm home with my kids, I'm really going to change what's in the pantry that's available to them for snacks. Those are the things that are letting you know they're open. The self-motivational statements, I know I can lose 20 pounds. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet, but I know this is within my reach. And then increased questions about change. So if I wanted to do, more exercise, how do you think I would get that in? Or can you tell me about a gym that has affordable membership prices? Those are the things that are starting to go through their minds about how they might make the change. And then imagining, when I lose that 20 pounds, I'm going to look so good, or, whatever it is that they imagine about the change. And then starting to experiment. Well, I tried the 50-50 plate. This is going so well. I'm really starting to enjoy vegetables more. Those are the things letting you know that they're ready to make more of a commitment to the change, to increase or decrease the behavior. Oops. I'm in a hurry to get through. So here's something we very much value at Envision. It's our readiness to change scale. And this is a pretty simple tool to find out where your patients are on the continuum for making change. Always, always, always start with 0. I often hear new users of MI saying between 1 and 0. Well, 1 lets you know they're already thinking a little bit about change. 0 is, no, this isn't important to me at all. So be sure on that scale, ask 0 to 10. Now, we often ask, most new people using MI will often ask about the confidence first. On a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you that you can make this change? Well, and that is a good place to start, but what I don't want people to forget is to ask how important it is. If it's really not important for a patient to stop smoking now, because really what they want to work on is increasing their fruit and vegetable intake, let's go there first. 1, they're going to have success and it's more important to them. And 2, if things are important to people, they're not going to get them done. So we've just wasted 15 to 20 minutes with that client trying to get them to quit smoking when really what they want to do is increase their fruits and vegetable intake. A further way to assess these questions, so let's say I ask a patient on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you that you can make this change, whatever it is? And they tell me, 4. And I say, okay, well, tell me about being at a 4 and not a 6. In that moment, they'll tell you what some of their fears are about making that change, some of the things they're still holding on to about why they do that behavior, and that's another place to explore. And then you can also go backwards. Like, so you tell me you're a 4. Well, how come you're a 4 and not a 2? They'll say, well, I feel like I can do A, B, and C and have some success. So it's a way to explore. And then on this confidence thing, on the importance, I often ask, particularly if they're like a 5 or 6 or below, what would it take to get you from a 5 to a 6 or a 5 to a 7? And then they'll tell me, well, it's really more important that I take care of this first and then I want to work on that. Or I just can't imagine that I would be successful, so I'm trying not to make it very important because I don't want to fail. I mean, then you have all these areas to explore with them and help them make a path, help them get a goal. If your game out there in cyberspace, I would like to play a game called Drumming for Change Talk, and I know I went over these things pretty quickly about change talk, the desire, the ability, the darn commitments. But we're going to play this game where I'm going to read statements from patients that we've had. And you're going to tell me whether or not you hear the change talk. And you would probably have to unmute, huh, Kevin, so that I can hear the drumming on the table?
Yeah, you'll want to star pound to unmute if you muted yourself.
So,
yeah, be loud.
Let me explain a little. So this is our change target, our behavior target. Remember when I said you want to have a target we're going to focus on? It's improved glycemic control. And here are some of the component behaviors we're going to hope to move with this. Some diet, some exercise, some medication adherence, regular monitoring, some stress management. So we've got this patient with us. This is our target behavior. Now I'm going to read some statements patients have made. And if you think you're hearing change talk, drum on the desk. And then we'll try to decide what it is. A desire, ability, a reason, a need, okay? So, first statement. I think I'm doing about as well as I can at this point. Yay, you're all winners. There's no change talk there. So, next one. I certainly don't want to go blind. Anybody want to venture on what change talk category? I don't want to go blind.
Reason.
Reason. Yay. Okay. I've just always really, really disliked exercise. No, that's full-on resistance. That would be another webinar about how to work with that. I really hate pricking my finger. So there's a reason there, yes. You guys heard a reason, but you heard a reason why not. Not a reason why for.
Okay.
You know, I really wouldn't mind cutting down on stress in my life. Any guesses?
Maybe both reason and but could be a need or desire, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, it could be a need or a desire. I probably really could exercise more. Okay, and what's that one?
Ability.
That is ability. Yes, I'm going to take my medication every day. Yep. Change talk? Which one?
Commitment.
Commitment. Total commitment. I'm going to take my medication every day. It's so hard to stay on a diet. No, there's resistance there. I just love chocolate. There's no change talk there. Okay. I have got to get my blood sugar under control. What do you think that is?
Need.
I think reason too.
I'm going to get my blood sugar under control.
Commitment.
Commitment, yes. I'm willing to take the oral medication, but I am not willing to take insulin shots. I am willing to take the medication.
So they're committing,
Oral.
but there's a little
Desire.
Well, and there's a commitment there. I'm willing to take the oral stuff. I don't want that insulin. So that patient is telling you, I'm willing to do this, but you got to give me the right thing to do. And it's going to be oral meds. So there's commitment there. There is no way I'm going to take insulin. That's pretty much resistance. You know, I would like to lose some weight. You guys are good. Which one?
Desire.
Desire, yes. Sorry I missed that if you said that out. You know, I don't think I'd mind checking my blood sugar once or twice a day.
Ability.
Yep. I don't like watching what I eat. I mean, I guess I have to, but I don't like feeling restricted. That's a little tricky one. So, that is change talk. And it's tricky because it's set up with some resistance, but in there is, I have to. I don't like feeling restricted, but I know I have to do this. So that person is giving you a need to make the change. There's a recognition within that resistance. Oh, I wish I could have less stress in my life. It is. It's a desire. Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I think I might be able to cut down on sweets.
Commitment.
That's a commitment too.
Or desire to.
Or an ability.
Yeah.
I might be able to do such and such. Okay, I'm not much on eating vegetables. I guess I'll eat more of them, but I don't really like them. And they've given you a commitment, haven't they? Yeah. Oh man, I'm gonna do what the doctor asks. It's pretty scary thinking about losing my feet.
Need.
And reason.
Yeah.
The thought of losing, you know, that's scary. Okay. So one more. I hope to take off about 20 pounds.
Desire.
Desire. Are we all talking about our personal desires here?
That's so exciting.
Yes. There's some commitment in there. You know, I'm hoping I can do this. I'm working on it. So that gives you a sense of how your patients might present some change talk. So here, I use this a lot, and we're going to take a few minutes to, at the end of this, to just kind of go through how we would get to this. We often have brief patient encounters, particularly in primary care. So what's the strategy if I only have 15 minutes and I want to try to get to a place to influence a target behavior or help this patient make a plan, a strategy, a goal for change? How am I going to do it? So I'm going to make an opening statement. This is where MI can be directive. Can I take a few minutes to talk to you about your glycemic control? They're going to say yes or no. Right away, if they tell you no, in the spirit of MI, you would back off. Okay, why are you here? What would you like to talk to today? That's where motivational interviewing can be different from other strategies, is if the answer is no, the answer is no, and we don't step on their toes. Unless, you know, we're worried about a life and death situation, then to heck with MI and let's take care of the patient, okay? So then we're going to use reflective listening as they answer. What, you know, I've said what my concerns are, and they're going to tell me what they're struggling with, and I'm going to use, I'm going to repeat some things back to them. I'm going to rephrase what they said to me, and then I'm going to affirm. So this is really challenging for you. I think we could create an action plan. Would you be willing with me to come up with a plan you could work on for 30 days before you come see me again? And then you're going to offer some brief, focused advice. People think when they use motivational interviewing that you really can't. There's never a place to offer advice, but there is. And then if you ask for it, may I give you some advice about, and if they say yes, and it's really rare for a patient to say no, because they've come to us thinking of us as experts, and they want to hear what we have to say, whether or not they're going to put the ideas in practice in their healthy lifestyle plan. They're there to hear what we say. So we can say, well, I'd like to give you some advice about that. Is that right? Yes, I would like to hear because I'm really stressed. Remember, if they say no, just walk away. It's not worth it. By not pushing, by honoring the no, I don't want to talk about it, and not pushing it, you have done an important thing in motivational interviewing by leaving your door open. Because they're going to come back and see you again because they felt like you didn't judge them. They felt like you had empathy and that you heard what they had to say and they didn't want to talk about it right now. That's a door. I've left the door open. They're going to come back. They're going to think I value their opinion, that their health is important to me, and their opinions are important to me. And that's going to build a stronger, helping relationship. Here is your core. The ORs. Here we are again with another acronym. Okay, use your ORs. ORs. Open-ended questions. Affirm responses. Reflect what you hear and then summarize it at the end to be sure that you got it all. And besides being sure that you understand what they said, it lets the patient know she's listened to every single thing I've said. This is important to her. So open-ended questions. They encourage the patient to tell you more about the topic. They function as a door opener, and they lack judgment. Closed-ended questions, the differences can be answered in a single word. Have you been feeling depressed today? Do you want to stop smoking? Those are all questions that are like door closers. Nope, I don't want to quit smoking. I like smoking. Yep, pretty much I feel depressed today. I mean, then where do you go from that? Where's the opening? So if it's an open-ended question, think of them as door openers. For instance, how are you feeling today? What role does nicotine play in your day-to-day life if we were going to talk about smoking? I'm asking them to explore, to explain, so that I might understand. If we handle those effectively, if we make room to keep continuing on, if we keep our hair from standing on end when they tell us things that make us uncomfortable as healthcare providers, the door just opens a little wider and more information comes out. We get to know them better, and then we start understanding what their motivations are, and then that's the place to make the plan for change. Affirm. This is the key ingredient of the MI style. It's supportive and non-judgmental. And again, we're talking about valuing the autonomy of the client. Effective affirmations are brief and precise. I don't want to go on and on telling the client how wonderful they did in the last 30 days. And just hit it directly. You're really committed to your food log. Thank you for bringing it back. Let's go over it. Wow, you've given a lot of thought to your family's meal needs, to thinking about how to feed them healthier, to changing what's available in your pantry for snack time. I already said that. Affirmation enhances self-efficacy. I always get tripped up on that word. Self-efficacy and empowerment. It acknowledges their positive attributes. I'm noticing you've put a lot of effort into that this month. Well done. Well done. I imagine it wasn't easy. It's even to say, wow, this was really a struggle for you, but you still managed to hit 2 out of 3 of your goals. That's impressive. One more thing about that. There's an expression about blowing smoke on someone, going overboard with the praise. They're going to see right through that, and particularly younger, the adolescents and stuff. So be sure that how you're affirming is authentic, that you're not saying things that don't fit your personality or your style and that just heap on a lot of, oh, this is fabulous. somehow then it undermines it. It's not sincere from the provider. So listen reflectively. It's offering small summaries of their utterances, presumed meanings of the statements. As you get better with reflective listening, you can kind of even change the words your clients use for a greater impact. When you start with reflective listening, I think it's okay to do that parrot thing. Just reflect back what they said to you to make sure that you've understood it. Did I get that right? Be brief. Remember the nonverbal cues. It's a partner of the open-ended question. So I hear what you said was, did I get that right? And ask, did I get that right? Am I understanding what you're telling me? Practice, practice, practice. Because you do want to move away from that parroting style, but all of us begin there. We all start by parroting back what we've heard. Okay. And then summarize. That is pulling all the statements together. It's used to guide the patients toward it. So what I've heard you say is A, B, and C. It seems like this might be a good idea. This change might be a good idea. What do you think? It reinforces any of the change statements, reinforces any of the change talk we've heard, their ideas about how they might do something differently. If we summarize it back, they're like, oh, that does sound like a good idea. And you're reminding them that it came out of their mouth. It's not me telling you what to do to change. You said these things. Did I get them right? Do you think we can make a plan? And these are what, I call them our simple language tips. They're not particularly an MI thing. There's a book we've read called Crucial Conversations here in our office at Envision when we're trying to figure out how to have tough conversations either with patients or providers that we're working with on a QI project. And I think some of this is pulled out of this book, and people who have gone to social work school will probably recognize the buts and the whys. The word but has this way of negating everything that comes before it. Well, it seems like you really worked hard on your diet this week, but you forgot to fill in Friday. So all they hear is I forgot to fill in Friday, not the part about you did so good this week, or, even with my kids, I do this. You don't want to say, I'm sorry, but you really made me angry when you slammed the door. It's more like, I'm sorry that we got in an argument, and don't ever slam your door again. Find a way to use and instead. I think that opens up the conversation. There are times for buts. There are times that you need to just say, but this is not going to happen again. But when we're working with our clients and thinking about change, we probably would rather use the word and. And then know whys. Why has this weird way of implying judgment? Why would you have let your kiddos go to McDonald's 3 times this week? Or what is it? So this would be the different way. What is it about having dinner at McDonald's that your family really enjoys? And then I've taken all the judgment I have about them eating at McDonald's regularly, and I'm exploring what makes them do that. Is it money? Is it mom's lack of, meal planning? Are there other ways that I can help her get things done that don't involve McDonald's? And, I think we use that here in the office with colleagues. We, to not ask, why would you have done it that way? Or why didn't you do such and such? It's kind of a hard judgmental message. And then the other thing for providers is to be unafraid to admit you were wrong, you were off target, you were in left field, and say, I'm sorry. And I have a particular pediatrician that I work with. She's done multiple MI live trainings with me. And she has gotten so good at this that she is not afraid to walk in with a family, say, I am sorry, I didn't hear exactly what you were saying to me, and I gave some tips that might not be helpful, and would you say it again? And this time I'm really listening. And they're like, it's mind-boggling. How often does a doctor tell you, I'm sorry, I got that wrong? I'm sorry I didn't hear you. And I think being able to say that, I misjudged, I miscalculated, deepens our sense of commitment to them and communication and engagement with them. It really is our job to connect and engage. It doesn't have to be our job to tell people what to do and make them do that thing so that they can get better. Does that make sense? And that's all I have to say today. So, now we do patient presentations, right?
That's
And
right.
did you pull those up? If anybody has any questions out there, I'm in the room, so let me know.
Carole, I had a question.
Yes.
You were just talking about avoiding the word why.
Mhm.
Sounds mental. Would you say it's okay to use that when you're asking them to imagine reasons for change? So saying, why would you want to make this change? Tell me.
Yes, I would think,
Oh.
yes, in that place it would be okay to use the why, because they haven't just told you something about a behavior or activity or that they're engaged in that's not in their best interest. So we're not saying, well, why would you do that? We're more interested in, why would you want to make this change? Tell me how this change might help you. So yes, I think it would be okay in that example to use the word why.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And we could go ahead and take this opportunity too to, if you have not announced your name at this point, please go ahead and announce your name so we know you're out there.
Hey, I'm still here, Rosanna Trujillo, and I'm with Children's Medical Services. I'm a social worker,
Oh.
and I do need CEUs.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we'll take care of all that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Kirsten. I'm on my cell phone at Lend.
Hi, Kirsten.
Okay, and which case did we want to start with today? With Kara's or?
Yes. Kara, you're our first presenter.
Okay, great. I had some questions about an autistic child. The mother was very concerned about the child getting enough nutrients. Since he is autistic, he shows a strong need for sameness. He uses repetitive body movements. He has a short attention span, and he acts up with very intense tantrums and emotions. And she's tried serving him repeatedly healthy dinners that they follow, including like a diabetes diet. And he seems to really like texture and finger foods. So we were both concerned about him getting enough calcium and nutrients. He does drink almond milk, and we were able to give him chocolate Ensure in the hospital. And he was in the hospital because he had 3 weeks of incontinence. And so he was having diarrhea 15 times per day, and the mom reported that he lost 10 pounds in about 3 weeks. Do you have any advice for autistic children and getting them to eat a balanced diet?
So, Carole, who do you have in the audience outside the Envision folks? Just so I know who the other providers are.
Oh, okay. So I have written down, so Kara Gardner, Claire Banks, Lauren Foley from UNM, Leslie Ghazi, Liz Chavez, Robin Roberts, and Rosanna Trujillo. And in the room we have Sarah, Courtney, Carole, myself, and Ellie.
Okay. All right, so I guess I'll be the teacher here for a second. So, Kara, can you tell me a little bit about the child's anthropometric measurements? I know everyone has the case in front of them.
Sure. Yeah.
So, when I look at this, it might be helpful for others to hear, what you came up with when you plotted this child on the growth chart. And then also, was that during the hospitalization when the child had lost weight, or was it previous to the weight loss?
It was after the weight loss.
Okay.
His BMI is 17.5. He's 56% of his BMI. His weight percentage is 67.5. His height percentage is 81. But his actual weight, 39.5. His height, 150 centimeters. The percentile on the growth chart was, the 67 percentage for his weight.
So, Carole, this is a perfect case for you after your discussion today. So, Kara, if you were to look at this, and Ellie and the other dietitians, nutrition providers on the call or in the room, if you saw someone with a BMI percentile of 56 and their weight percentile was at the 67th percentile and their height percentile was at the 81st percentile, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think that he might be a little stunted, but
any other observations from any of the other folks in the audience? Ellie, I'm going to pick on you because I know you're also another intern.
I kind of mix it with my case, so I kind of
You got to pay attention to other people's cases too.
I agree with Kara actually, so that sounds
All
the
right.
same to me.
All right, so I'm going to play the teacher again, right? And this is interesting. We had this call yesterday, and Kevin was on the call with us at Harvard with the Harvard group, and we were talking about barriers to participation in telehealth clinics. And so this is one of the circumstances where I don't want people who are presenting to perceive me as the keeper of the knowledge, because I'm not. I have a lot of experience, and I can shine some light on things, and I hope that that's the way that this is taken, and not that you're on rounds and your attending is going to beat you over the head with something, or that your preceptor doesn't appreciate the work that you've done. I think coming from Carole's standpoint of using motivational interviewing to discuss the concerns that this family has, because that's what I heard first, is that this mom has made some fairly significant efforts to introduce her child to different kinds of food, and she's kind of gotten some negative feedback. It sounds like he gets really upset, and the tantrums are maybe somewhat scary. However, she has discovered that he likes certain kinds of textures, so that she has modified his intake to some extent to match those textures. I think the first message that I would give this family with this child, based on their concerns, is this paints a picture of a child who is growing just fine.
Okay.
So his BMI is at the 50th percentile. We don't usually get to see that. We usually see kids that are above the 95th percentile. So to see a child that actually falls in what we consider a healthy range, and his height and his weight are, well within what we would expect typical. So I don't know, Carole, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that stuff. Anthropometric measurements and stuff, I don't know. I mean, that's outside of my realm. I'm a social worker.
No, I was talking about the other part that you do know about.
Well, talking with the family, is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, because it sounded like the question, Carole, that you have is that the parents are really concerned about this child's nutritional health. And this child has all kinds of risk factors that can get in the way of this child being healthy. And the child just spent 3 weeks in the hospital with a medical manifestation that has nutrition implications.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I was trying to do was start first with, yeah, all of that happened. You guys are really concerned. You're making a really concerted effort. I want to give you a piece of good news.
Okay.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Did that make sense?
So what you're saying is they have these concerns and he's been in the hospital, but our job, if we were going to use motivational interviewing or that style of, communication and empathy, we would let the parents know that we're not as concerned about his growth as they might be.
Exactly. In other words, that they are doing a good job, and even though they're concerned, we're acknowledging the concern, but we're giving hopefully a place to be comfortable. In other words, that we have some time to work on their concerns, that he doesn't appear to be at this moment in any
at risk,
immediate nutritional danger. Does that make sense?
Yes. And
Kara, does that help?
Yeah, definitely it helps. I think she was really concerned about calcium too, because he won't drink any milk, but he'll have some pizza, so he'll get a little calcium from the cheese, and he's able to drink some almond milk. But she told me that she was using a liquid vitamin, and she was hiding it in some of the drinks, and that was working.
Okay. So she's being very creative. I mean, that's sort of the creative tack I would take also. One of the things to keep in mind, and we've had several discussions, mainly in toddlers, because toddlers exhibit some of the behaviors you're talking about with this child with autism. Mm-hmm. And the strategies are the same. First of all, there's no food worth fighting over, because those behavioral things are real. And in terms of, if Carole were seeing this child with me, we would ask, what other things is the family concerned about? Are they concerned about his progress in school? Are they spending a long time or a lot of effort and time and energy working on his nonverbal communication? What are some of the other things that they're dealing with? Because one of the things that we might be able to do, if those other things are also important, give them some feedback in terms of the fact that this child is actually growing quite well. I mean, one point in time, so I'm saying that I don't have a trend. So that would be one thing I would go back and look at if I were this child's provider, is see what the growth history has been. The fact that this family has worked out some strategies around this child's comfort with sight, touch, smell, taste, texture, means to me they're really very much in tune with what this child is willing to do. And I think the fact that they've figured out how to put a multivitamin into some of the things that he's consuming is probably pretty good. So one of the things that you probably should do is see if mom will give you the information about which liquid multivitamin she's using, to see what the dose that she's able to get in every day, and actually if it's meeting this child's calcium requirements. And his requirements aren't going to be any different than any other child that age, so you would use the DRIs for this. He doesn't have anything else that appears going on that would make his calcium needs greater. Medications or whatever. I don't see anything listed here. So that's one strategy. The other thing was that looking at whatever their choice of almond milk is, because some of the almond milks actually have additional things added to them, and there's a variety of them out there. So I don't know if you did those two things with this family, but that's a really great place to start.
Okay.
This is Carole too. Do they have any other kind of support? I mean, I know that he's in special ed, so there is a social worker connected to him at school, but do they get any services outside of that for the family?
They didn't say that they did. He just has the special ed class that he goes to, and they help him out with learning. Yeah. But they didn't say that they went to WIC or anything like that in the past.
And I was just thinking like a family, a case manager, or someone that would help connect him to other services that this child or family might benefit from along, it seems like there's a lot going on for the family.
And one of the it's good that you brought that up, Carole, because where I am physically right at the moment is I'm at the CDD, the Center for Development and Disability, in a LEN program, listening to the students give their, well, not now, I'm actually stepped out of that room, but listening to them do their research presentations. But the bulk of the patients that actually come through the CDD now are those children with autism. So there are services available here, and a library, and parents reaching out, and family advocates, and all those things available to them here. So that's another place that you could refer them to, where even if it's not paid for by whatever insurance they have, those services are free as part of, the community of care that's provided through the CDD.
Mm-hmm.
Through the CDD?
Mm-hmm. Center for Development and Disability. And it's part of UNM. So if you look up the Center for Development and Disability at UNM, they have a nice website, and they list some of the family services that are available. But it's a really great resource for families like this.
Great, okay.
And then there was one other kind of funky thing that I wanted to throw out there. Depending on where this family, how involved you get with this family. He was talking about drinking soda. So one of my questions was, just hydration overall. But the other was drink only soda, water, and almond milk. There are some liquid supplements made by some of the big formula companies that are, juice looking. They're clear liquid, and they're fortified with vitamins and minerals, and we certainly use them in patients who are on, the old-fashioned clear liquid diet, or who don't like that or can't tolerate that casein-based or protein-based supplements. So one of the things that you might be able to do is, and again, I don't know what the financial resources are for this family, but one of the things I noticed that was advertised recently, and I've seen it more in the stores, are those devices that carbonate beverages.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could potentially, in a situation like this, use a supplement, a clear liquid supplement that has vitamins and minerals in it that tastes like a soda, because you can make it like a soda by adding the carbonation to it with one of those devices. So it was kind of a funky thing as I was reading through your case, but...
Huh. Thanks for mentioning that.
So sometimes with children with autism, you have to be a little bit creative, because this is a very typical thing, that they are very sensitive to certain things. Not all children have difficulty, not all these children have difficulty with texture, but it's very, very common, and they get, and the danger sometimes is that they do get linked into 2 or 3 or 4 foods that they'll eat, and then the concern about nutritional adequacy is very real.
Mm-hmm. How many times should I recommend the mom to offer a certain type of food? Because she was concerned about that.
Yeah, and
after reassuring her that her child is growing just fine.
I think one of the things to acknowledge with her, and maybe she'll bring it up. Maybe Carole can give us some tips here about the diagnosis of autism. Again, one of the features is this resistance to change and resistance to new things. And so if that is creating an environment at the dinner table or the lunch table or the breakfast table that is unpleasant for the family and unpleasant for the child, I wouldn't do it. In other words, I would stick with those things within the texture and color and smell that the child accepts. So, one of the things, French fries, well, one of the things, could she try French frying lots of things? How about French fried sweet potatoes? Or, so there might be some things that she do within those, that look like the other things that he's used to.
Yeah.
And they're not dramatically different, because it might decrease that tension that occurs at mealtimes, because that is part of the diagnosis, and it's not something that we're going to overcome in a similar way that we are with a toddler who's typically developing.
Okay.
So this would be certainly a family that you'd want access to a dietitian who's comfortable with children with autism, so that they could actually address that with the family. One, you want to monitor both, but also sort of the mom's. She does want this child to have an opportunity to explore a variety of foods. However, it's not going to happen probably on the same trajectory as it would with another child.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else I can help you with?
I think you covered everything. I don't think I have any more questions, actually. Thank you.
So there was that one thing about the fluid, because you know, just making sure that this child's adequately hydrated. I'm assuming that when he was in the hospital, one of your questions was, should the child receive nutrition support after 3 days if he's only eating fries and 2 ounces of Ensure in the hospital? I was assuming, though, that he was getting IV fluids, maybe, or not?
He was.
He was. Okay.
He was on IV.
So, you know, the child's eating, he's sick, he's got IV fluids. You know, certainly that's sort of a cutoff for when we would, you know, want to provide something else. So you would have some flexibility in a peripheral line if you were very concerned that you could put protein and fat in there in small levels with a peripheral TPN solution. But certainly you're not going to stick a tube down this kid's throat, given all the other things that he's, you know, aversive to. That would probably be counterproductive.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, enteral support, which is the way we would like to go. But some of these other things, you know, that he likes, you know, again, the soda water added to, you know, a clear liquid supplement, some of those other kind of tricky things you might try.
Mhm. Yeah. That sounds like it. That's really helpful. That sounds like the mom would really take to that. Thanks.
So are you going to have an opportunity for follow-up with your preceptor?
With the preceptor, yeah, and then she can contact them. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Yeah, because this is another one of these these kiddos that we just don't want them to not have access to services. And pediatric nutrition services, as we've talked about in your classes, and Carrie, you've had a number of years of contact with me. That's really a limited service in New Mexico. So when we find kids like this who really could benefit from that, first of all, I'd certainly get them hooked up with CDD. I'm over here part-time. There are providers that are contracted through here, so that there would be some way that she could access some services if she's not able to get back to whoever she was seeing in the hospital.
Okay. Okay. I will definitely let the preceptor know.
Okay.
And that'll be a great resource. I really appreciate all the information.
Well, thanks for bringing this case. This is really interesting. And you did a great job filling out the history was detailed. So it was nice, because I'm not there to actually hear your presentation and be with the other people. It was nice to be able to read it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a second presentation. So thank you for that presentation and for consulting with us. And I hope everyone can hear just how educational this can be, and please bring your cases. So moving on to Ellie.
Hey.
Present your patient, please.
Hey everybody, so since we are running out of time, so I'm trying to be short and sweet. So actually I've seen that patient like 6 months ago at WIC. So she was a 1-year-old Black African American girl, and if you don't mind, I'm just gonna give you a brief history about her height and weight.
Okay.
And then I ask my questions. Hopefully you don't mind. Okay. So I'm just gonna start maybe a little bit differently with my own notes about her birth information, and then with the current information at that time I've seen her. So at birth time, her weight was 2.67 kilos, length 49.53 centimeter, and her head circumference was 34.2 centimeters. So I just put all this information on WHO growth charts. So based on that information, her length for age was at birth time about 50%, her weight for age around 10%, and weight for length was almost 5%. So at that time I saw her actually. So she was 7.19 kilos. Her length was 68.5 centimeter, and head circumference is 42.5 centimeters. So her length for age was almost 3% high, and weight for age less than 3%. It was between like 1 and 2. So weight for length was almost 10 percentile, which didn't look good. And the reason actually we kind of lost tracking with this patient at work because it's kind of hard for the client. For some reason, they don't keep up with the appointments, so we are missing them. And the reason, because the doctor actually mentioned she is underweight, the patient was diagnosed with a failure to thrive, and the mom was freaked out. So, and the doctor kind of pushed her, it's a good idea to see the nutritionist. That was mostly the reason she back to work. So, and I understand we need more information, but sorry, so we're missing a lot of information, but that was my best. So I look at the previous history and the current history, so that's what I have. So there wasn't any family history of food allergies, no chronic disease, and I apologize for that typos. The mother wasn't 3 feet 5 inches, she was 5 feet 3 inches, the father was 5 feet 8 inches, and her diet actually basically she's eating pasta, mashed potato, chips, fries, red meat, and fast food. Mom doesn't follow any regular feeding schedule, and the patient was on breastfeeding. So, and she had, any question? So she had some actually medical problem when she was born. She was diagnosed with GERD at age 5 weeks, and then at age 4 months, she was diagnosed with constipation. Yeah, that's kind of sad. And the social history, mom is not working. She wants to continue breastfeeding her kid as much as she can. And back to the next page. And mom was really, really anxious. She was looking for some help, actually. She was there. And my first job was to kind of calm her down. So just relax. And she's basically still waking up during night for breastfeeding 3 to 4 times. And those are kind of information about her, again, nutrition history. So for breakfast, she's mostly breastfeeding, not very particular foods, and 1 or 2 times fast food during weeks, kind of scare me. And she's actually anemia. Her hemoglobin was 10.7. We don't have no information about her past history about the hemoglobin. So actually, back to my questions. Sorry, hopefully I didn't confuse you guys. So that was a kind of community setting. We had like 15 minutes to talk. So I was wondering if I had this patient in clinical setting and I would like to have a full assessment for my patient, besides those information about height and weight, what other information I would need to make a full assessment with failure to thrive. And also I'm looking for some medical and psychosocial risk factor for this situation, because mom had some concern about her child development, because it was okay. She could sit unsupported at age 6 months, and she's not walking independently at that time, and she could say a few words. To me, it wasn't really scary, but mom, she had a lot of concern about that. So I'm just looking to see if some cases like that, they have a risk, they're diagnosed with failure to thrive or underweight. So what risk factor they are actually having? And my last question is basically, it's about the nutrition. So what kind of advice or suggestion would a pediatric RD give me for improving the patient's food intake and actually feeding schedule? Because it seems there are some, problem with her feeding schedule as well. So that's all.
Is the
All right.
child?
Anybody in
only
the room want to
child?
take a stab at it?
Sorry.
Is it an only child?
Carole, do you want to
Yes.
start?
Yes, that was her.
Well, I have started.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
That's okay. So it is an only child.
It's
her
a first child, yes.
Okay.
That's kind of, I understand, it was really challenging, and it was a really pleasant experience with parents, so.
It was a pleasant?
No, unpleasant. So
When you visited with them?
yeah, they were kind of anxious because they said, okay, because I understand they're expecting, healthy child, especially for the first one. They don't have enough experiences. And when they hear something about, the word is kind of scary, failure to thrive, and they said, oh my God, what's going on? So
Yes.
we need help.
Okay.
And they scare me too.
Pasta, mashed potato, chips, fries.
I know.
That's an interesting diet for a 1-year-old, right?
Yes, and it seems they just looking, and I ask them, they kind of scare maybe the child, her situation, she cannot eat very well, so they're trying to have like soft puree texture.
Okay.
So that was another thing I had to talk to them. So that's, as long as she can sit unsupported, keep upright, she should be okay. So you can go further.
Yes, and it's not uncommon. Not all kids walk by one. Some,
I know, I understand,
so
yes.
for her to be able to hear that this isn't outside the norm. I'm wondering how we might get, and Kirsten will jump in about the failure to thrive piece. What I'm wondering is how to get some support for mom, because anxiety by the mom, particularly at such a young age, will affect everybody in the family, and particularly her children. And so who's to say some of this, behavior, these kind of odd behaviors around, food aren't coming from mom's just anxiety and not quite sure, well, should you try this and would this be okay? And their fear around kind of expanding the foods they introduce. And so how might we support a new mom? I mean, Kirsten, do they, when like up at the hospital, when kids are diagnosed with things like failure to thrive, do they offer support groups for families with that? Or I don't know.
We wish.
No.
Not
Okay.
necessarily.
Okay.
This is sort of the issue, is that if this diagnosis occurred in just a freestanding pediatrician's office, we know what resources they have in terms of people like us. Not very many.
Right.
So, this diagnosis could have been given and the family doesn't know what to do with it. Now, the fact that the child's at WIC means that because of the financial constraints, this child then is eligible for some certain things. So the things that you're talking about support, first of all, a parent, pediatrician, or even the intern at WIC can refer to Child Find. So in other words, an early intervention
That's
program.
what I was going to say.
So that's,
Yeah.
that's financially based. So I would start there. That's one thing that could be done. Unfortunately, failure to thrive, unless it's connected with some other medical diagnosis, again, we had this discussion when we talked about Kara's patient. There aren't very many pediatric dietitians in New Mexico, so having access to one and somebody who's comfortable with this is going to be hard. However, the WIC program has their special projects dietitians, so they have some RDs in the state who might be able to take on a family like this and help coordinate, some of that care. But I agree with the anxiety and the first child. But WIC also is a referral program. That's one of their missions. And so there should be somebody at whatever WIC office that they were seen at that would be able to tie them to that Child Find program for concerns about, development, even mom's concerns, because it's okay to have a look. The other thing is that as part of the referral service, she might also be able to refer, if this child is on Medicaid, to the case workers that we know are present in the Medicaid system that are social workers, so that there might be something that they can hook her up with. And because I'm at CDD, they have this home visitors program in public health for first-time moms. And so I'm just wondering if this child also would have access to that program.
That'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
And then there's some in-home, kind of assessment of what's going on with that. So I think you bring up a really great point. I know that we're running out of time. Ellie, I appreciate you going back and taking care of the growth charts, because when I looked at it last night, I thought, oh gosh, I don't have these in front of me. So I'm glad you got my email. So what this looks like to me from the standpoint of just trends, and again, I'm in mind's eye trying to figure this out. This was a child who had a lower birth weight than her height when she was born. So in other words, she probably looked like a pretty skinny little infant, you know, if you guys can sort of imagine what that might look like, not the rotund baby, but because her height was at the 50th percentile, 25th to 50th percentile, but her birth weight was only at the 10th percentile. And she's just barely over that cutoff of 2.5 kilograms, and 2.5 kilograms is the cutoff for low birth weight. So she was just above that, so she probably looked pretty skinny when she was born. However, that's the way she was born, and it looks like she's kind of continued along that trend, except that her length has fallen away from where she was. So she was at the 25th to 50th percentile, and she's now at the third percentile for her height. What that tells us, and rightly what you've been concerned about, Ellie, is that she has the markers of failure to thrive. So in other words, she's had a move of probably 1 to 2 standard deviations away from the mean, or in this case, 2 percentile lines or centile lines, you know, the big lines on the CDC growth chart, away from where she started. So that's, I'm sure, why the pediatrician is concerned. So I think one of the things, in addition to what Carole's brought up, because I think it all is tied together, is asking the mom, and it might be the social worker that actually asks these questions, tell me about your child's interest in solid food. So that might be a way of actually getting at whether or not there are concerns around this child's ability to eat solid food. But it also might give us some indication that mom doesn't know about transition from breastfeeding to solid food. And this is a real common thing. Right, Carole, you would agree? It's fairly common?
Yes, especially with your first one.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know,
so,
yeah. Huh. Concerns around transition.
So that this baby might be cueing mom and dad, they just may not know what they're looking at. And mom is responding to the child's hunger because she's breastfeeding very often, right? So it's not like she's not paying attention to this child's hunger cues.
Right.
It's just that at 12 months, breast milk is not enough anymore. It's not nutritionally dense enough. It doesn't have enough protein, doesn't have enough iron, doesn't have any iron. So the other concern here, Ellie, is if this child with a hemoglobin that's that low, we're probably looking at iron deficiency anemia, and so that needs to be communicated back to the pediatrician, because the therapy, unfortunately, for a child who may or may not want to eat, is this kid needs iron supplementation. We can't wait on the diet to fix this. And it's something that you can work on with the diet, but certainly you have to treat the iron deficiency anemia, because what will happen is iron is very important for cognitive development. So if we don't treat this now, if there are any concerns about this child's development, they're not going to get any better in the light of anemia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It kind of all came together, didn't it?
That was great.
Okay.
Okay, I know we don't
And we can
have
talk about it some more, Ellie, when I'm back in the office. We can figure
I
out.
was wondering, maybe for my first question, we can talk later, you know, because we just passed 10. But
Yeah, and I know that we're out of time, and I was sort of long-winded on the other. But, you know, again, I just want to reiterate that there's nothing that any of you did wrong in the care of your patients. This is why we have you bring these cases, because, one, we learn, the people who are on the call, about what's out there and maybe how all these things are connected. And sometimes we forget to connect all the dots. And that's the beauty of being, you know, having a case consultation like this, is that we have a number of providers who bring different perspectives, and hopefully we can come up with some creative solutions. So I don't want you to think that I'm the one who has all the answers. I just happen to be the RD who's in charge of this particular clinic, so that's part of my job.
Thanks for calling in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right.